All right, 25 till the top of the hour. In a second, I'm going to introduce the Wall Street Journal's Kimberley Strassel. I've gotten a hold of her brand new book just out today, best-selling author, and this is a defining book on what is happening in the country at this moment. Resistance at all costs, how Trump haters are breaking America. It's the name of the book. Let's listen to the mob and the media. We've gone through the double standard. You know, Ukraine, if it's Donald Trump vice president and Donald Trump Jr., very different coverage. If it's Donald Trump with classified top secret information on a secret server and breaks the espionage laws and subsections over and over again, if it's Donald Trump's subpoenaed emails deleted and acid washing the hard drive and hammers, it's a whole different story in the mob. If it's Donald Trump and Russia, well, we already know where that goes, even when there's foreign investigations that go nowhere. But a dirty Russian dossier unverified is used for what? To secure the 4 warrants over the course of a year to spy on the Trump campaign transition and presidency. Whoopsie daisy. And what about, Ukraine is important, but it's not important that taxpayer dollars were leveraged to force somebody that was investigating the son of the vice president. They don't care about that either. That's a conspiracy theory. All right. Well, why is he bragging about it? Unanswered questions. Was spying abroad and outsourcing intelligence gathering to friendly nations for the purpose of circumventing American constitutional law and our rights to privacy and against unreasonable search and seizure. That important. Let's just play this quick.
If he takes the risk of going to trial and he's convicted, that could be seen as an impeachable offense.
If Trump were caught on a video camera snorting cocaine in the White House, maybe with one of his children, there was at least a chance he'd be impeached.
If he's not a legitimately elected president in your mind, there are tools that Congress has.
I don't see how that wouldn't be an impeachable offense.
That tweet fits the Republican definition of an impeachable offense more fully than what Bill Clinton was actually impeached for.
Impeachment is very difficult.
Grounds for impeachment.
It's an impeachable offense.
All right, joining us now, reacting to all of this, Kimberley Strassel, terrific writer. I've gotten to know her. She's been on radio and TV with us many times before. It's called Resistance, parentheses, at all costs, how Trump haters are breaking America. Kimberley, first of all, I can't put it down. It is a defining book of the moment we're living in the country. None of it's good. The double standard, I mean, it is all truth, reason, fidelity to truth, common sense are gone. It's a mass psychosis of all these Trump haters that never got over losing the election.
Well, first of all, Sean, thanks for those kind words. I really appreciate it.
No, I mean it.
And everything you said about the double standard is absolutely right. And I would only add to that, I would also say there's a psychological term for this, which is projection. So everything that the left accuses the right of doing, not only has the right not done it, it's because something that the left has done itself. And that's really the theme of this book, is that for 3 years, we've been told that it's Donald Trump who is undermining our institutions and breaking our democracy, and he's a budding authoritarian, et cetera, and so on. If you step back and you take an objective look, first of all, his administration has been far more rule bound than anything we had in the last 8 years of a presidency. But when you look and see where the real damage is coming to each of our institutions and core standards, it's all coming from the left, whether it be what they did at the FBI and DOJ, what they've done to the Senate confirmation process, or what they're doing now with House impeachment.
So what's the first thing you learned that was kind of most mind-blowing of the tactics of this radical left that you want this audience to know?
Well, it's about the real damage that is happening. And I think this is very important because, again, we hear constantly from the other side that Trump is breaking democracy. But let's just step back and look at this. We have a nation that has lost its faith in the FBI and the Department of Justice. And that's not on Donald Trump. That's on Jim Comey and Andy McCabe and those who abused their authority at the FBI to launch a counterintelligence investigation and break the rules with the FISA court. We have a Senate confirmation process that was broken during Kavanaugh. That's not Donald Trump. That falls on Senate Democrats and activists. We have people that are reducing the meaning of impeachment, a House that's instantly hitting AG Bill Barr with contempt resolutions for just following the law. We've got bureaucrats acting as whistleblowers. We have judges out in the judiciary who are issuing national injunctions right and left in violation of all judicial norms. It's that damage. At some point, one day down the road, Donald Trump won't be president anymore, whether it's 1 year or 5 years. But these things that are happening, this damage, it's going to be with us for a long time.
So Speaker Gingrich, longtime friend of mine, smart strategist in his own right, is saying this is not just a resistance. And I agree with him. This is a coup, or at least a coup attempt, a direct attempt to have a duly elected president removed from office by any means necessary. So do you agree with that?
Well, I certainly think some of the actions that have been taken fall into that category. I mean, the one that, keeps coming back to me was this supposed discussion between Andy McCabe and other members of the Department of Justice about removing the president under the 26th Amendment. I mean, that's a highly disturbing thing. 60-some million people voted. And I think that also gets to the impeachment question, too. Look, let's be clear and let's be fair. Under the Constitution, I mean, the House, if they want to, they can impeach you for walking the wrong way, wearing the wrong color socks. It's on them. But fundamentally, they have to have accountability for that because it's overturning the results of the American people and the results of an election. And I think that, were they to do that without the support of any Republican or Republicans in the Senate or the majority of the American people, then that is an attempt to remove a president.
Former Deputy FBI Director McCabe, he started the investigations into Carter Page and Papadopoulos, General Flynn, and now in an interview says Christopher Steele was a vetted and trusted source. Okay, that's just a lie on their part. Your reaction?
This is also something that is just a complete breakdown of our norms and institutions. And of course, I'm talking here about the media. I mean, Andrew McCabe is at the center of an enormous and serious accusation that the FBI fundamentally abused its powers and did the wrong thing. And we're about to get an inspector general who's going to put a big report out on that. We have an attorney general who was so concerned about it that he actually tasked a U.S. attorney, John Durham, with looking into this question. Okay, if you are the center, you are the target of that investigation, and you have been accused of this much abuse of power, what responsible media station puts you on as a paid analyst and allows you to just tell your side of the story and actually get a salary for it? I mean, we didn't used to do things like this, but the media has also jumped into this resistance. They to levels that we've never seen before. This is not just bias. This is them working outright to see the end of this president. And so you end up with John Brennan on TV. You end up with Andy McCabe on TV. You end up with all of these guys also serving as anonymous sources for stories that are presented as straight news. It's not a good situation.
So, Dana, I'm watching the left, and I actually believe, Kimberly, that, maybe I just become too cynical in my old age. I just know too much. No president has had to deal with the leaks that this president deals with. The Australian prime minister, the Mexico president, the president of Ukraine. I mean, the resistance. And then you get all those associations, Adam Schiff's office. Maybe I shouldn't have worked with them and I should have been more honest. The double standard is clear, but they seem to have a real fear about Barr right now.
Well, I think that's why you're seeing what we're seeing. Yeah, I think that's why we're seeing a lot of this, right? I mean, we've been watching this for months, Sean, but the pace has certainly ratcheted up, right? I mean, why suddenly now are we having a full-on quote, unquote impeachment inquiry? Why suddenly is the media going all in on this to an extent that they've never done before? Why do you see the attacks coming out on AG Barr for asking questions? It's all designed to undermine the credibility credibility. They are vastly concerned about what's about to come out, and they're trying to change the narrative.
You know, I mean, this is the whole thing. I know they want to, and I'm hearing, well, first I was hearing Thursday or Friday this week. Now I'm hearing likely Monday or Tuesday that we get the Pfizer report. I hear it's devastating. What do your sources tell you? And what do you hear about the, quote, Durham/Barr investigation, where they spent an awful lot of time with our Western European allies and their intelligence agencies in Italy and Great Britain, and then really far away in Australia, because we believe there might have been outsourcing of intelligence gathering to circumvent laws?
Well, first of all, everything I have heard about Horowitz is that he's a pretty straight up guy and he's been asking the right questions. And I think that's important. And one thing I would remind people, look, to me, there's going to be some litmus tests when you look at this report. Don't forget that how all of this got started is Devin Nunes put out that memo all the way back in February of 2018. And he said, here is how the FBI abused the FISA process. And then you'll remember not long after that, Adam Schiff put out his own dueling narrative. Well, I think what we're going to find out in this report is that Nunes memo was right. And then that, to me, is going to require a lot of people to now look back and realize that what Adam Schiff said was a bunch of hooey, and they're going to have to ask themselves, is this a guy that they trust to be running this impeachment inquiry?
Well, I mean, I think that question, but anybody, I mean, look at Nancy Pelosi doesn't even know what the transcript is going to say. But we'll impeach him either for that or we'll just find another story. Let's throw some toilet paper up against the wall and see what sticks here. But I guess the worst part of all of this is that you have to suspend all consistency, all fidelity to truth, objective truth. You have to suspend all common sense, and you have to buy into that it's okay, as you point out. You know, everything boomerangs back on them. You have to ignore the sins of the people you like politically and blame Trump for something that is far less severe, even in terms of an accusation. That is not a reality that we can survive in.
No, that's just it. They have to understand that at some point, if they're going to let all of these genies out of the bottle, the genies are going to come after them. OK, at some point down the road, I don't know when, there will be a Democratic president and there'll be a Republican House. And if this is the bar they're going to set for when it's allowed to impeach, we're going to end up impeaching every single president. You know, at some point, there'll probably be a Democratic president that gets to name somebody to the Supreme Court. If what they did with Kavanaugh is our new norm, does a country really want to go through this every single time? And
no, you want to know what the difference is
about the damage.
And Democrats would argue that it was with Clinton, but you remember the old independent counsel statute. Ken Starr identified 11 specific felonies to be investigated as it relates to Clinton. That never happened with Mueller. So then they just move on to the next thing. All right, let's try this one to impeach him. I think we've done some of our best work here on radio and on TV, the montages with the dates, and they've been screaming impeachment since the day, 2 days after he was elected. All right, quick break. We'll come back. Kimberley Strassel, Resistance at All Costs, How Trump Haters Are Breaking America. Brand new book, Wall Street Journal columnist. This book is phenomenal. Quick break, right back. We will continue. News Roundup, information overload, the great Sidney Powell at the top of the hour, and more straight ahead. All right, as we continue, Kimberley Strassel, Wall Street Journal with us, a brand new book out today. I mean, this is a powerful book. I don't know why I didn't get an early copy, Kimberley, but you're forgiven. That's fine. Resistance.
Oh, man, I will have words.
I got a hold of it today, and I'm trying my best. I'm loving it. I'm not putting it down, and you know, I've got other work to do today, and I'm like, wow, this is a defining book. Resistance at All Costs, How Trump Haters Are Breaking America. How does this end as it relates to Trump? You think he gets impeached and reelected? Do you think what?
Well, I think Democrats make first of all, I think they put themselves on a path where they're going to have an impeachment vote, right? And secondly, I think Nancy Pelosi, because she knows it would be too embarrassing, is going to twist enough arms until she gets the number she needs. And then I think that is a massive mistake, because impeachment, as you know, I know, it's a political tool. You're not supposed to use it unless you have bipartisan support. You can make a serious claim where you get the American people to understand what you're doing. You don't do it in secret. You don't do it in hiding. I don't see how this doesn't backfire them in one way or another. And that's despite, by the way, Sean, I would note, enormous backing and help and cover from the media in every single action that they've taken.
All right, Kimberly, we'll put the book on Hannity.com, Amazon.com, bookstores everywhere. Resistance, parentheses, at all costs, how Trump haters are breaking America. Kimberly, great work as always. Thank you for being with us.
Stay right here for our final news roundup and information overload.
Hi, everybody. Dennis Prager here, and I have on the line a woman who is in Prager's Hall of Fame of Fighters. As you know, folks, I divide the good among three groups: those who do nothing, those who fight, and those who help the fighters. The first group is the largest, and she's one of the fighters. Kimberley Strassel of the Wall Street Journal and its editorial board. And is the book out today? When is the actual? Is it today?
It's today.
So I have you on the day of its publication. I am honored. Kimberley Strassel's book, Resistance at All Costs: How Trump Haters Are Breaking America. It is so. People should just know the subtitle and say it every day like a mantra. Trump haters are breaking America. By the way, you write about the decline of journalism. Do you know that in Sunday's Times? I just want you to know this because I don't expect you to have read every piece in the opinion page. They actually published an article saying in which Prager University was declared as a vehicle to lead people to racism and the alt-right.
That is unbelievable. So just to offer the counter version of that, we watch it around my dinner table with my children. And since I'm in no way in favor of my children embracing racism or the alt-right, I can guarantee that is not what PragerU is about.
But the fact that they would publish that, and then in the same thing, that Jordan Peterson is part of the dark web.
Look, the media has lost all of its boundaries, and the left has lost all of its boundaries. And I think one of the sad things is that because they can't win with arguments these days, they take to either rigging the system or just demeaning their opponents and doing everything they can to denigrate them and make them out to be disreputable. And it's we see it happening not just with you, Dennis, or those of us on the conservative side, but there's a campaign right now to delegitimize Attorney General Bill Barr, even to delegitimize John Durham, the U.S. attorney who's looking into this, a guy who has a sterling reputation in Washington. This is an attempt to derail what's coming.
What is coming?
Well, I think in terms of talking about the truth of what went on during the Russia collusion hoax over the past few years, I think there's a lot of details that are going to come out that probably are not going to be very flattering to a lot of people on the left and to people in the media who swallowed this for all that time.
Do you have anything you can divulge that you're thinking specifically of?
No, I don't, other than that I'm very optimistic given the two reports that Inspector General Michael Horowitz has already put out, one on Comey and one on McCabe, which I thought were pretty brutal, and it suggests he's not afraid to speak truth to power.
Okay, so when you wrote this book, and again, folks, I periodically tell you something is really important. This is one of them: resistance at all costs. When you were writing the book, were you writing, in effect, putting into a book what you already more or less knew with all your research to write your columns and editorials at the Wall Street Journal, or did new stuff come to you?
So there's new things in the book, but I think the important part of the book is that it attempts to wrap together and put into context the last 3 years. And when I started it, it was just because I'd spent all this time writing about the Russia collusion mess. And it just struck me that for 3 years, I'd been listening to the mainstream media and the left inform me that Donald Trump was breaking all these institutions, destroying democracy, undermining all of our most cherished things. And yet at the same time, I was doing all this reporting, which showed that, in fact, it was Jim Comey and Andrew McCabe and a dossier from an opposition research firm and activist groups on the left that were, in fact, breaking all the rules in their ambition to get rid of a sitting president or a candidate at the time. And the more I looked around, the more I realized that pretty much summed up that rule breaking, a whole bunch of things that we were seeing coming from the resistance to Donald Trump, whether they were breaking our Senate confirmation process during the Kavanaugh hearing, whether they are breaking the incredible power of the impeachment tool by using it for partisan purposes, whether they are breaking trust in the bureaucracy or trust in the FBI by abusing their powers. There's some real damage happening here, and it's long and it's lasting, and it's going to outlast Donald Trump by a long shot.
Okay. The details I want to get to, like Comey, your first chapter. Before that, though, one big macro question. You use the term in your subtitle of your book, Trump Haters. This hatred comes from where?
Well, first of all, I'm so glad you point that out, because I made a conscious decision to use that word and not use the word. When the publishers first came to me, they had the word critics. And
That's a riot.
So I rejected that because, you know, I'm a critic of Donald Trump.
Of course, exactly.
You are too. Any thinking person,
right?
It's their obligation to look at a presidency and judge those things that are good and those things that are bad. The haters are something different. They have rejected this presidency before the president even took office and have been willing to take whatever means they deem necessary to get rid of him. That's a very distinct group of people that I put in that category. And what I mean, and how did they get this way? Look, first of all, part of it, you know this, I think every Republican president gets a harder time from the media and, you know, obviously than others do. There's a certain disdain there for conservative ideas, all right? I think a huge amount of this comes from the fury of losing the 2016 election, and don't underestimate that. The left was banking on Hillary Clinton extending Barack Obama's legacy of taking over the Supreme Court for the first time. They had grand ambitions, and they were furious at the loss. But I think part of it is just they can't stand Donald Trump's brand of politics, and there's a contempt for, I think what he's exposed is a contempt that a lot of the elites just have for average Americans who lean a little right and support these policies.
So the hatred, it's a very complex question, and I agree with everything you said. But so let us say, God forbid, the president died just peacefully in his sleep, and Mike Pence becomes president. Would there be less hatred?
I don't know if there'd be less. I think there would be marginally less hatred, put it that way. And I think that maybe the tactics wouldn't be quite so insane. But what does worry me is that now that the left and the media have got a taste for this, for just doing whatever they want and breaking all the rules and barriers that they want, I make this point in the book a lot. It's very hard to put these genies back into the bottle.
Exactly. So let's talk about the genie before we get to Comey then. Let's talk about this genie of the press. What's happened?
Well, what happened with the press, look, again, you and I have known the press has always leaned left, and there's always been a bias there. But I've always, until the last few years, felt that it was sort of almost a passive bias in that I think the problem with the press is that a whole bunch of our writers, they all socialize with each other. They all think the same way. It's a bubble, right? There's a lack of diversity of viewpoint in newsrooms. And so sometimes they didn't even realize the degree to which they are biased or lean left. What we've seen in the last 3 years, and I've been in journalism for 25 years, is the active decision by the press corps to join one side of a partisan war, and then to get rid of all of their standards that people have come to rely on in order to have a fair and free press, but to get rid of all of those standards, to use anonymous sources, by the way, many of whom are probably the people that are being accused of abuse while they were in power, to run uncorroborated accusations right and left, and just to sort of spin these theories. This is having a real damage. Again, the genie in the bottle thing. Once you get rid of those standards, how do you ever get them back? And right now, the press has accomplished the extraordinary feat of having an even lower approval rating than members of Congress. Do you know how hard that is?
I didn't know that. That's fascinating and very disturbing, but merited. The book by the woman, a great woman, Resistance at All Costs, How Trump Haters Are Breaking America. They are, my dear friends, they are. The book is up at DennisPrager.com.
The Dennis Prager Show.
I'm interviewing a fighter, as you know, my distinction among good people, Kimberley Strassel, and I want to tell you quickly that this is a fundraising time for ADF and other fighters. Alliance Defending Freedom, they supply the lawyers defending religious liberty and other liberties in the United States, up to the Supreme Court. They don't get funded, people don't get defended. They're a remarkable group. You'll do a lot of good when you give them. There's a banner at DennisPrager.com. For the vast majority of people, I know it because I know me, the issue isn't the giving, it's the getting to do it. So I hope to motivate you to do it, because I know once you do, you will feel better about America and yourself. 800-469-9656, 469-9656. Or the banner for ADF at my website, Kimberley Strassel, has written this powerful book. It really explains the Trump hating and why it's breaking America. This is it's not a political book. It is obviously, but it's not just that. It's about our civilization in distress because of these hate. You mentioned President Obama. If the press were honest, how would they have reported his presidency in light of what they have reported now?
Well, think about how often this press corps has suggested that Donald Trump is breaking institutions or exceeding his authority, okay? And I go through this in the book because, look, I have no trouble saying that I think Donald Trump is very norm-breaking in certain ways, right? I mean, you'd be crazy not to say that. But I'd argue that it's mostly in terms of his rhetoric, his tweets, his demeanor in office. Mm-hmm. But if you actually look out at his agencies and you step back and take a breath and have an objective view of his policy and what has come out of his departments and his agencies, Mike Pence, the vice president, was in charge of the transition team. An enormous number of constitutional conservatives got put into the key posts. This has been a very rule-bound administration. I mean, look, it's an administration. If you're a dictator, you don't go and get rid of tons of regulations and make the power of the federal government smaller.
That's a great point. Yes.
You know, you don't appoint textualist judges to the court.
Right.
That are going to follow the law. So, but if they were being honest about this, these were the words they would have used about Barack Obama, because the contrast is quite stunning. This was a guy, you know, pen and phone. Whenever he couldn't get Congress to pass legislation he wanted, he told his agencies to just make it up, and he ruled by executive fiat. When Obamacare wasn't working, they just unilaterally changed the law. They politicized the Department of Justice and used it for political purposes, like going after the financial sector over things, you know, just to make political points. These are things that should be very concerning. If the press had been honest, they would have talked about that administration's actions.
I just want to reemphasize your point. This is the man they accuse of becoming a dictator, but he is the guy who's dismantling governmental power.
Right.
How exactly do dictators who reduce governmental power become dictators? It's so obvious that it's painful. And here's another thing I just want you to react to. I have said this from the beginning of the Trump administration. To the shock of people who hate Trump, especially Democrats, we would like them to know we were just as unhappy with the second election of Barack Obama as you were with the first election of Donald Trump, but we didn't carry on.
That's absolutely correct. And this gets, again, to the rule breaking. I think the problem, there's a reason these people call themselves the resistance. Think about what that evokes, Dennis. It's a hearkening back to World War II,
right? And
people who were fighting against an illegitimate occupying force. So that is their mentality, and therefore why they believe they are entitled to not follow all the rules that the rest of us followed, for instance, when Barack Obama was elected. It's not right, though. And we're ending up in a situation, I keep reminding my friends on the left, that, for instance, those engaged in this impeachment drama at the moment. Okay, let's say that Donald Trump loses next year, and let's say Republicans win the House and the Senate. Do we immediately commence impeachment proceedings against Elizabeth Warren? Is this how we're going to settle differences these days? That's something, again, that's the breaking part of America, and something we all need to think very hard about.
Well, they don't, as Harry Reid didn't when he changed the rules of filibuster.
Right. And the problem we have, and I worry about this a lot in the book, is that you know and I know that Washington does not improve its behavior. Once you lower the bar, it's just a race for people to keep lowering the bar.
That's real important. So I want to get to more chapters of your book. Again, folks, the book by Kimberley Strassel of the Wall Street Journal, Resistance at All Costs, How Trump Haters Are Breaking America. This is almost, I don't know if unfair is the word, but I don't like talking about this because it's a tough issue. But did you leave, when you wrote your last word, did you leave with any optimism for our country?
I do have optimism. In part, I'm a naturally optimistic person. It's why you get up and fight every day like you do, right? I mean, if you think there's no hope, then you wouldn't do that. But there's a couple of reasons for optimism. One, I think people are becoming more aware of this bad behavior and beginning to resent it. Okay, I think that's that. I think that you also see some people who are figures of authority trying very hard to get the truth to Americans. I'm very hopeful that Bill Barr is going to release the information that we have been waiting so long for that explains how we got to the whole Mueller and Trump-Russia collusion craziness. Because if you do that, you're taking the first steps to restoring some integrity to the FBI and the Department of Justice and to government. And that's the sort of thing that at least in that regard, fixes the damage in that it is beginning to make people once again have some trust. That's the problem that we've got at the moment in terms of a lot of this. But we have a lot more to go. We need civil service reform, for instance, to stop these kind of bureaucratic uprisings that we're seeing, the leaks that are coming out. And we need to also elect people who take their duties more seriously, take impeachment seriously, take Senate confirmation seriously, and don't just play partisan politics all the time.
The book, Resistance at All Costs, How Trump Haters Are Breaking America, Kimberley Strassel. The book is up at DennisPrager.com. And I remind you about the ADF banner at my website, Alliance Defending Freedom. The more we raise, the more the good guys can fight. Remember, those who help the fighters are as important as the fighters.
The Dennis Prager Show.
Okay, everybody. Kimberley Strassel, one of the great writers at the Wall Street Journal and a member of its editorial board, has written Resistance at All Costs, How Trump Haters Are Breaking America. It's a very important subtitle, not Trump critics, as you pointed out. And the other is they're breaking America. They're not breaking Trump. That's a very operative element there. And I'd like you, well, you gave already some examples of the lowering of the bar in so many arenas, like the impeachment process, like the press. Any other arenas that come to mind? Oh, yes, the intelligence agencies. So why don't you give us a little of your assessment of Comey?
Well, I think that this is one of the more damaging examples, right? You know, to this day, I think a lot of Americans, when they hear the words, Jim Comey opened a counterintelligence investigation during an election into a sitting presidential campaign on the basis of opposition research given to him by the rival campaign. It's a awe-inspiring, mouth-dropping thought. It's incredible that someone would use power in such a way. And then you go into the details, which your listeners are very familiar with. But again, one of the things I try to do in the book is provide concrete examples and specific instances where people broke either standards or rules or regulations in their desire to achieve a political outcome. And so you don't just have the opening of that investigation, but you have the way in which the FBI wasn't honest with the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court in obtaining its warrants. Not telling them the exact details of where they obtained this dossier, the fact that this person was in the employ of the rival campaign. You have the fact that Jim Comey went, and to me, this remains one of the most obnoxious things that Jim Comey ever did, and it says everything about his character and what he was up to. He goes on January 6th of 2017 to give a briefing to the president-elect about Russian interference in our election and does not tell him that his agency had an active counterintelligence investigation open into his campaign. Now, remember, this is at the same time that Comey is telling Trump that he's not the focus of anything. And for many, many months afterward, the FBI would insist that it was only ever a few outliers in the Trump campaign they were looking at. Why didn't you tell the president? Well, I think he didn't because we now know he went in there hoping that the president would say something incriminating about himself. That came out in the most recent IG report. So this is not how you operate, and we know that Jim Comey, two IG reports that have pointed out that he broke the rules, that he was insubordinate. This is a guy who felt as though the rules didn't apply to him, and that's a very powerful agency to have someone with that level of arrogance in charge of.
Is broke the rules the same as broke the law?
I don't know yet, and I'm going to leave it. I am not a lawyer, Dennis, and I'm not trying to skate out of this. I'm just saying that I'm going to leave it to the Inspector General and to the Department of Justice to decide that, because and I say that meaningfully in that I worry sometimes that too often we think that the only measure of accountability are people in jumpsuits and, orange jumpsuits going to jail. And I just want to state for the record, I think it's really important as a society as well that we remember that often just getting fired or being called a disgrace is the disgrace that it is. And no matter how much the media is presenting Jim Comey as a hero, this guy is the only person in the history of the FBI to get canned and with cause.
Wow. And with cause. Yep. All right. We'll be back in a moment. Kimberley Strassel's book is up at DennisPrager.com. How much time do we have here? We have time. We do? Yeah. Oh, good. Oh, very good. Let me continue with Kimberley then. That's great. Sorry, Kimberley. I thought I had to take a break. So James Comey, does this whole thing with him and CIA and other areas of the intelligence, I'll ask it on a personal note. I admit to being surprised at the level of corruption at the top of intelligence agencies. Was I naive?
I think we were all naive. Dennis. I think that this is inconceivable to many people. Here's the thing. I remember talking to Devin Nunes, who used to run the House Intelligence Committee, and by the way, who did yeoman's work discovering this information, and we shouldn't forget that. And I give him a big shout-out in the book because, you know, against incredible obstruction and against a terrible media narrative, they doggedly got to the bottom of a bunch of this. And thankfully, because otherwise we wouldn't know.
All right, hold on there. Hold on. Remember what you're saying, because this is critical. Devin Nunes, and then my question about was I naive? Book is up at DennisPrager.com. All right, everybody. We're in a tough time in the United States. And it's documented very well. Resistance at all costs, how Trump haters are breaking America. Not breaking Trump, folks, breaking America. That's the key. And they are. So we were talking about James Comey, and you say I was not alone in being surprised at the level of, is the word corruption too severe at the highest echelons of intelligence?
I don't think that's too severe a word. And no, you were not alone. And I was saying that remember talking to Devin Nunes, and I asked him specifically, I said, so you sat on the Intelligence Committee for a long time, and you helped write a lot of these rules about surveillance and counterintelligence laws. Is there anything actually in the counterintelligence laws that says that you can't open a counterintelligence investigation into a presidential campaign or to a political campaign? And he looked at me and he goes, no, because it was such an insane idea. It was such against everything that these laws were written for that we would never have assumed anyone would do it. But if we had thought that, we'd have put in a prohibition against it. So my point being is that nobody ever expected that this was the way that a counterintelligence probe would be used.
Wow. So is it conceivable that James Comey would be indicted?
I don't know, and here's a couple of reasons why. One, because don't forget how sly and smart this guy is. You know, one of the reasons he was not indicted for leaking information is that even though some of it was classified, he went out of his way to make sure that it did not go through a classification review while he was still on the job. So he could later claim that it wasn't classified when he leaked it. Clever, right?
Yep.
And, you know, he's a lawyer first and foremost. And for all the shenanigans that went on there, he probably has a pretty good grip of what the law is. And the question is, did he break the law? That will be for us to find out when the IG report comes out and the Durham information comes out.
My sense is that, and this is purely conjecture, is that Brennan is behind much of this. What's your take?
That's going to be an essential part of the answers we need because it hasn't received enough attention. And I'm not sure. I'm trying to lower expectations or just set the right expectations for people. We may not get an answer to that as part of the Inspector General report. And here's why, because he is supposed to look at behavior within DOJ and FBI. And CIA is somewhat out of his purview. And moreover, the Inspector General, remember, does not have the ability to subpoena people, does not have the ability to impanel a grand jury, cannot demand folks who are outside of his, currently working within the Department of Justice to come and talk to him. So this may be a question we get from answered from Durham. And I think it's going to be really important because, remember, we have very strict prohibitions against the CIA conducting any form or fashion of a domestic operation. And big question for me is how close to that line did Brennan come, or did he cross it?
Well, right. My sense is that unless one has a complete revelatory experience like the people who wrote The God That Failed, who were communists and then realized that they had followed something evil. I don't think that John Brennan, who was either a communist or voted communist, I don't think that really ever occurred to him. I don't say he is. I'm not charging him with being a member of the Communist Party, but it's hard for me to believe that he is not that far left to this day.
Well, one of the reasons it's not hard to believe is because he left the CIA and took a position as a political commentator. I mean, I think this speaks volumes, right, Dennis? We just forget. And again, standards. We've had many CIA directors in the past, and they have understood that position, you need to be a little bit removed from partisan politics. It's a serious job in the government, right? You're charged with protecting the national security of the United States, and you need to go about it with some gravitas. I think the real fault here, and I'm a big fan of laying accountability at the correct feet of the correct people. Accountability here somewhat goes to Barack Obama, who put a man into that position who was clearly a partisan. And, he immediately left, went and took a job on a liberal cable network. And it's astonishing to me, just as a separate point, that cable network lets a guy who has been accused of being central in this mismanagement stand there and continue to give what they claim are unbiased opinions on all of this.
I didn't know that. He is now a commentator. Where, at CNN and MSNBC? Where is he?
I think it's MSNBC. And I like to be accurate in things.
No, I know you do, right. So finally, are Americans becoming aware of the Trump haters, what is your word, breaking of America? Or do you think it's still reserved to mostly Republicans and conservatives?
I think there are a lot of Americans. I'll tell you, Dennis, when I go out, I speak to a lot of average Americans. And one thing that is very interesting to me is that I have spoken to people who, since Donald Trump was elected, have been on the fence, not necessarily about his policies. They like his policies. They don't particularly always like his attitude or his behavior, okay? And what's been interesting to me is nonetheless how much more committed they have to re-electing him, not even almost despite of him, because this is no longer in their minds about him. It's about the tactics that have been used against him, and they feel they need to reject that. And I find that a very interesting phenomenon.
Well, you did great. Thank you, Kimberley Strassel.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Special woman. Special book, special woman. Resistance at all costs, up at DennisPrager.com.
The Dennis Prager Show.
Hi, everybody. Dennis Prager here. That was quite an interview with Kimberley Strassel. What is happening, what they are doing. The left broke Brazil. The left is breaking Venezuela. The left breaks whatever it touches. Not liberals, not conservatives, the left. It has been really a search in my life for what animates people to be so destructive. How do you break something so good as the United States of America? What would animate you to do that? Guy writes in the New York Times, was it yesterday or today? A billionaire, that capitalism is over. There are too many wildly rich people. It's an astonishing thing. First of all, if he really believes it, why doesn't he give his money away? I don't understand that. It's not right that I'm a billionaire, so give your money away. They don't act on anything that they preach. The coast will drown. How can I buy another house on the Florida coast? The world will be destroyed. But we won't do nuclear power, which is completely carbon-free. 1 out of 3 girls at USC is going to be sexually assaulted. But boy, do I want my kid to go to USC. What'd you say? It was $80,000 a year?
60 to 80. I mean, it's
60, whatever it is. If it's $5 a year. That's why I'm not sure they believe. It's so sick, the world of the left. I don't know. Do they really believe I'm sending my daughter to a place where she has a 1 in 3 chance of being sexually assaulted? But then they say it. That whole article in the LA Times today about the number of assaults of girls or females or whatever you wish to say, women, if you couldn't even say that now. I mean, but it doesn't mention once. As a result, some parents are rethinking whether to send their daughter to a regular college. I wonder if there are 1 out of 3 or 1 out of 4 assaults at Brigham Young, the Mormon University. I suspect not. We'll be back.
The Dennis Prager Show, live from the Relief Factor Pain-Free Studio.